Lesson 14. In Lesson 14, my goal is to teach you more about how to use the word est. Up to this point, all the verbs that you know include the subject. For instance, the word sum means I am. So we have the subject, I, and the linking verb, am, all in one word. Likewise, the word es is the same. It includes the word you, which is the subject, and are, which is the linking verb, all in one word. Then we looked at est, and we studied how est can mean he is, she is, or it is. Of course, we've only used it to mean he is for the sake of simplicity. Now in Lesson 14, we're going to see that est doesn't always mean he is, she is, or it is. Sometimes it can just mean is. And this happens when there is another word to be the subject of the sentence, so that you don't need to have the word he. Like this first example you see here that says, Poeta est agricola. And this sentence means the poet is a farmer. So in a sentence like this, est is going to just mean is. Consider for a moment if we translated est as he is here. What would the sentence sound like? It would say, the poet, he is a farmer. So you see, when there's another word to be the subject of the sentence, we don't need the word he. So we can just leave out the word he, and est will simply mean is. Now, in the next example, where it says poeta est, this is like the sentences that you've seen so far, where there is no other word to be the subject. So in a sentence like this one, we do need the word he that's included in est. So poeta est will mean he is a poet. And if we translated est here just as is, then the sentence wouldn't really make any sense. If we translated it as the poet is, then that wouldn't really make any sense, because then you would ask, well, the poet is what? So when you see the word est, and there's no other word to be the subject of the sentence, then you will need the word he that's included in the word est. But when there's another word to be the subject, then you will not need the word he, and you can just translate est as is. Now, the last thing I mentioned in this lesson is that if you can't figure out whether est means is or he is, try them both. So if you feel confused, try translating est as he is and see how that sounds. And if that doesn't sound good, then try translating est as is and see how that sounds. And once you try them both, the correct meaning should become clear. And as we look at the exercises here, we're going to see how that plays out. And I think that once we do it a few times, you'll see what I mean. So with that in mind, let's go through the exercises and see if we can get some good practice discerning how to translate the word est. And I'm going to show you how to try both ways as a technique for helping you to decide what the proper translation is. In our first exercise, we have agricola est poeta. Now, most of you just look at that and think, well, it's going to say the farmer is a poet, and you would be correct. However, if this sentence confused you, you could try to translate est both ways, just as a way to help you get through it. So if you tried to translate est both ways, here's what might happen. The first time you might say, the farmer, he is a poet. And then you'd think to yourself, oh, that doesn't sound right, we don't need the word he. And then you would know that you just need to translate est as is, and then you would say, the farmer is a poet. So in this way, if you try translating est both ways, it becomes clear fairly quickly what the correct translation is. Let's try it again in number 2. Nauta est poeta. Again, just by looking at the sentence, you can probably tell that it's the sailor is a poet. However, if it confused you, you could again try both. You could say, the sailor, he is a poet, and then you'd think to yourself, oh, I don't need the word he. And then you could try, the sailor is a poet, and then you'd think, oh, that's correct, that works. So again, by trying them both, you can just sort of feel the sentence out and see what sounds the best, and that helps you translate. In number 3, we just have the words est and nauta. And in past lessons, we've translated lots of sentences like this. And so for that reason, you can probably just look at it and say, he is a sailor. But if this sentence confused you, again, you could try to translate est both ways. You could say, he is a sailor, and then you might think, oh, that sounds pretty good, but I'll try it the other way too. I'll try to translate est as is, and then you'd be stuck with is a sailor or the sailor is, neither of which make a whole lot of sense. So again, by trying translating est both ways, the correct meaning becomes clear. In number 4, we have the poet is not a sailor. The word poet is the subject, so we do not need the word he that's included in est. In number 5, we have nauta non est. So in this sentence, we'll translate est as he is, and the sentence will read like this: he is not a sailor. If you were to translate est as is, and you did not use the word he, the sentence would not make very much sense. It would sound like the sailor is not. So again, trying it both ways helps us to understand the correct translation. Number 6, the poet is a farmer. We've already covered this type of sentence, as well as number 7, the sailor is not a farmer. Number 8, you are not a poet. We have the word s again, which means you are, which we learned a few lessons ago. In number 9, we have the optional word ego being used along with sum to mean I am, and then the word non negates it. So number 9 reads, I am not a farmer. And then in number 10, we have et being used twice to mean both and. So number 10 will read, you are both a farmer and a poet.